Hare Krishna, welcome. Thank you for coming back. Well, Zed, we're on the last letter now. The whole ABC is done. So there'll be a new series coming, but we're on the letter Z. So for Z, I thought we'd do the word zeal. Z-E-A-L. A person who has zeal is a zealous person, not jealous, zealous, possessing zeal. So there we go. So if you look up in the dictionary the definition of zeal or zealous, you find that a zealous person is someone having zeal, and that this means showing great energy and great enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or objective. Or otherwise it's called ardently active or devoted or diligent. So these are normal kind of dictionary definitions. If you go to the Sanskrit and you look up the Sanskrit word for zeal, it's utsaha. And if you look up the meaning of utsaha, according to the Sanskrit, it's having enthusiasm, zeal, energy, strength of will, and resolution. So utsaha encompasses zeal and encompasses therefore all the definitions of zeal, mainly energy and enthusiasm in pursuit of an objective of some sort. So although Bhagavad Gita doesn't use the zeal word many times, well, the Bible does, but Bhagavad Gita doesn't. But what Bhagavad Gita does is it uses the other version of the zeal word, which would be talking a lot about, say, for example, enthusiasm. It's very important in Bhagavad Gita. So that's just another aspect of zeal, another way of looking at zeal. So if we look at the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 26, or text 26, Krishna tells Arjuna, one who performs his duty without association with the modes of material nature, without false ego, with great determination and enthusiasm, and without wavering in success or failure, is said to be a worker in the mode of goodness. So apart from all the other characteristics there, being enthusiastic, performing the duty with enthusiasm puts one into the mode of goodness. So what one does with zeal. And when they say duty, we could cross-apply that to everything that we do. Prabhupada, who brought the Vedic texts to the West, so he translated them into English and brought them to the West and disseminated them widely. He did a talk in Los Angeles, August the 2nd, 1970. And Prabhupada understood the Vedic scriptures deeply, very deeply. And here's a quote from what he said. He said, on the path of Krishna consciousness, or God consciousness, on the path of Krishna consciousness, the first principle is enthusiasm. And then later on in the same talk, he said, 6 things are required for advancing in Krishna consciousness. The first thing is enthusiasm. So there we go with the zeal idea again, enthusiasm as zeal. And one of the earliest of the Vedic texts is called the Rig Veda. And in there is a quote that says, good deeds fill the mind with enthusiasm and zeal. So it's very much about good deeds and being in the mode of goodness. Also, by enthusiasm, one acquires unimaginable strength to get jobs done and attain goals, including spiritual goals. And really, the ultimate goal of human existence is the one big spiritual goal, which is to serve the Lord, purify ourselves, serve the Lord with devotion and love, and escape from material embodiment. So to do these things with zeal and enthusiasm is definitely recommended. And in terms of the ardently active aspect of zeal, which I mentioned as part of the dictionary definition, ardently active, in Bhagavad Gita chapter 18 verse 46, by worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. So by being active, we have to have activity. We have to, we can't just have no activity and say, well, I'll have no activity and somehow I won't get any kind of karma and then I'm going to escape from material existence. We have to have activity. And by work, it doesn't necessarily just mean your job. All actions and activity that we do is work, is referred to as work. So we can attain perfection. In other words, when we attain perfection, we can go back home, back to Godhead. We can attain perfection through performing the work, but we are told by worship of the Lord. So that means the work is done in a worshipful mode, in a mode of dedicating all outputs and outcomes to the Lord. And in a mode of goodness and devotional service. So certainly being ardently active as an aspect of zeal is mentioned right there. Be active with ardent devotional zeal in all that one does. Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 50 says, where Krishna says that we are to strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. Karma yoga are actions done for devotional purposes. So even there, Krishna is telling us that we should strive to do work, but do it for devotional purposes, not for money, not for ourselves, not for ego, not for pride, not for fame, not for recognition, but all that we do should be in devotional service mode. And in that case, it counts as being ardently active. So we'll be active, but in an ardent manner, whereby we ardently dedicating all that to the Lord. So the ardently active one does have mention in Bhagavad Gita, as does the enthusiasm aspect of zeal have mention in Bhagavad Gita often. And Prabhupada said enthusiasm is the number one requirement. So that is definitely in there. On the other hand, when you look at zeal in the Bible, the actual word zeal, it's 21 times mentioned as the word zeal and 13 times as the word zealous. So there's a lot of direct mention of it in the Bible. So in Romans chapter 12, verse 11, we are told, do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit, and serve the Lord. So again, that same Bhagavad Gita idea of applying our zeal towards serving the Lord, which is exactly how Bhagavad Gita asked us to do it. However, we do have to also be careful with zeal, because it could be shall we say, misused or mistakenly misplaced, if the person is acting out of some sort of ignorance, where there's some sort of knowledge that they need that they don't have. So, for example, Paul talks of people who had zeal for God, but they did not have zeal for Jesus. They did not understand that by rejecting Jesus, they rejected God or God's will. So they had zeal, but it was only for God, and there was none for Jesus. But by rejecting Jesus like that, they were also rejecting the will of the Lord. So that's not really correctly placed zeal. And in Romans chapter 10, verse 2, it's mentioned that the people were zealous for God, but their zeal is not based on knowledge. So they weren't aware that they needed to have zeal for Jesus and for God, and not just for God and reject Jesus. They weren't aware of that, so their zeal was going awry. And Paul himself, he had a lot of zeal when he was persecuting the Christians. He was certainly what we would say ardently active. He was extremely ardently active because he thought he was safeguarding the old Jewish law, and that some upstart had come to upset the apple cart, and that he would defend and protect the old Torah kind of Jewish law. And so he applied his zeal diligently, and he was ardently active, persecuting and getting Christians killed. So he certainly had zeal, but due to his lack of knowledge, he was applying it in the wrong way or in the wrong place. Paul says in Galatians chapter 1, verse 14, when he talks about this, he says, "And I advanced in Judaism beyond many of my contemporaries in my own nation, being more exceedingly zealous for the traditions of my fathers." Exceedingly zealous for the traditions of my fathers. So he knew that he had such zeal to protect the old law of his forefathers. And in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 13, it is mentioned, "Who can harm you if you prove zealous for what is good?" So again, it's linking back to the Bhagavad Gita idea of it's good to have zeal, but it needs to be linked up to the mode of goodness. So it's not so good to have zeal if you're working out of ignorance, because you can apply your zeal in the wrong places. So it's good to be informed and have that knowledge, spiritual, scriptural understanding, and then apply the zeal in the correct direction. And the correct direction is always, always, always towards goodness, towards the mode of goodness, and towards devotional service to God. Then you know your zeal is not being misplaced. In terms of zeal being eagerness or enthusiasm, again, the Bible uses those words in many places, many places, eagerness and to be eager and to have enthusiasm. Just a couple here, sort of. 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 2, we are told to be eager to serve. Be eager to serve. So again, that zeal, that eagerness must be directed towards serving the Lord. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8 verse 11, we are told to have eager willingness to finish the work we've begun. Titus chapter 2 verse 14 says, "Be eager to do what is good." So many times the idea of zeal, enthusiasm or eagerness is linked to the word good. Here in the Bible, it's linked to the word good, and in the Bhagavad Gita, it's linked to being in the mode of goodness. And in both cases, that is linked straight directly back to service to the Lord. That's where our zeal ought to go. So yes, for this rather brief last one in the ABC series, the concept and the idea of zeal is in both scriptures in incredibly similar ways. So let's hope we can go out there and have some zeal based on knowledge and applied in the mode of goodness towards the ultimate goal, which is service, devotional service, loving service to the Lord. Both books are in agreement on that. So I can't say come back next week for the next letter because obviously this is Z. So the next series will be something to do with the convergence, which is they're becoming ever closer, the convergence between scripture and science. And as a science-based person, being a high school physics teacher with a science degree and a lot of science readings that I've done, and I've got my scriptural readings that I do, I feel that I can look at some of that convergence and bring it through to people. How various spiritual texts and scriptures are converging, or the other way around, really, the science is converging because the spiritual scriptures were there first. The science is converging with the Shastra, which is the Sanskrit word for the scriptures, and that's across more than one faith or more than one scripture. We find there is science in scripture, and there is scripture in science, so they converge. So that's the next series. So I'm working on that now, and hope you will enjoy that series as well. So thank you for watching. Hare Krishna, stay well, and God bless.